Hello, everyone. I am Claudiu Murgan, the host of the Spiritually Inspired podcast. Uh, Welcome back to a new episode. Please support the channel by donating at spirituallyinspired.ca, subscribe to the channel on YouTube, and visit claudiumorgan.com, which is the sister website of spirituallyinspired.ca. My guest today is Rabbi Cantor Judy Greenfeld. Thank you very much for joining me today.
Oh, I'm so excited to be here, and I think we have so much to talk about, and there's nothing more that I like talking about are some of the things that you wonder about. So,
Yes,
looking forward to it.
I think you read my mind, and to be honest with you, I did through my research. I did a search on Torah mates.org, asking if a female can become a rabbi. And the answer was no, especially from the Orthodox Jewish tradition. So how come you're able to achieve such a feast?
Well, I never knew that women were allowed to be rabbis or cantors. I didn't have any model as I was growing up, and I'm not that old, so it's a newer thing. You're absolutely right. And one of the reasons that I'm not in the Orthodox movement, although I think they're amazing, and I have a deep respect for the Orthodox world and friends in the Orthodox world. I think that's one of the reasons that I did not choose to be a part of their communities, because I don't think women are treated the same way. I think it's just different. I think that I don't like a lot of the traditions that separate men and women. I understand them, but they still feel a little patriarchal to me. And the movements that I align with are, the conservative, reform, reconstructionist, the less dogmatic, I think, is where you'll find women. And only in the last, I would say, 15 years have you seen a surge of women come into the clergy world.
Yes. And to be
So
honest with
it's
you,
really allowed.
yes. And I wanted to touch on this subject of the feminine because in Christianity, the patriarchal leaders of the church removed the females, the feminine, from around Yeshua and from the scriptures, other than Mary Magdalene or Mary Magdala and Mother Mary. Pretty much everyone else is gone, and they're not able to be reintroduced into the scriptures, the real scriptures, and honestly, I don't know why, because I think somehow the church did accept certain things, but they didn't make them totally public, maybe within the church, and only the clergy is aware of it. And did you find the same approach in the Judaism where certain female figures were removed?
What's interesting is none of the women, and when you read scripture, and we share the same Bible, the same Old Testament. So the women we meet are the matriarchs. Only in the last 10 years, 15 years, as I've been evolving into what I do today, have you seen women like doing the research and finding out the backstory and revealing who these women really were? And the only way to do that, because scripture talks lightly about them and doesn't really give us a lot of insight into who they are, there's been a real anthropologic push to look at what was going on in the world at that time and how women would have been. And as I have studied more and more, it's the women who have been behind the men that are getting credit, but it took women to do that archaeological dig. And we don't have in Judaism a quorum of one-sex leaders, like where in Christianity they have the Pope in Rome and they have a whole council. Judaism doesn't have that. We have national organizations of rabbis who still make decisions today. but they don't come from a lineage necessarily. They earn their place more through it. It's more like education. And, I think there is some politics in it, but it's very, very different. It's not a governing body.
Mhm.
The fact that Judaism is such a patriarchal religion was the reason that I was really turned off towards it. Like it's very strange. If you had told me that this is what I would do 20 years ago, I would have laughed in your face. I mean, never. I was really turned off to the fact that I couldn't find the feminine. And when you just read scripture, you can't. But luckily, there are books called the Talmud and our law books that are filled with stories. There's Midrash, all of this canon or a library of ancient books. And all these rabbis talked about exactly what you and I are talking about. Brilliant, brilliant, brilliant minds who every century actually had to change some of the rules. But when you look at the Talmud, even the page, it's like a giant chat room of the most brilliant minds through time, like through hundreds of years. So when you study a page of Talmud, you get to know who these men are. It's only men, but you begin to hear stories, and the stories involve women and families and sensitivities and fairness and how, a lot of different opinions, and you get to choose the opinion you like. You aren't stuck with one way. And we also, inherent in Judaism is question everything I say, look it up for yourself. One of the reasons I went back in my 40s, okay, to do this work was because I wanted to know if half of the things that the male rabbis told me were true. Like there was always, we call them Bubba Minds, like old wives' tales. Like, if you have tattoos, you can't be buried in a Jewish graveyard. And I mean, and we believe these things. And I bet many listeners are going, is that true? I heard that growing up. And I really went back to find out what was true and think about why that was something, that we were taught, by especially during certain time periods, and how serious if you don't do that, if you break the law, because there's no lightning bolt. God's not going to punish you. That whole idea of punishment. No, you have consequences. We all have consequences, but you're not bad. And that good and bad thing, punishing, I think that's what humanity needed to keep us in order. Like if you really look at the Bible, the Torah, you see God treating humanity like children. That's not what that's a very small part of God, but I think humanity needed that.
Yes.
Even in the last 10 years, to call God a she, I had to really get used to that. That really was a tough one to say he, she. And the only way I could explain it to myself and to other people was to say, we think of God as this force, let's say. But I want you to think of the symbol of yin yang. It's not girl, boy, man, woman. It's yin yang. It's a totality. And that energy must be in God if we're created in the image of God, right?
Yes.
So that mentality came alive in the last 10 years too.
Yes, and I think the masculinity or the identification of God with the man, with the masculine, still comes from the patriarchal idea of the church, because they wanted the man to be at the top, and that's why God, it had to be a man, cannot be a woman. Even for some people, it's hard to comprehend the fact that Mother Earth is a feminine character, and she gives birth, and her energy is the birthing energy of who we are. So yes, a lot of conceptions have to change, and there are misconceptions in the past. But I want to stay a little bit longer on the feminine energy, because It's a well-known fact that the Gnostics and Nazareans, in those communities, the men and the women had the same ranks. I mean, they were equals. The same in the North American and South American indigenous communities. I mean, the woman could be a healer and she will be well regarded in that community. But nowadays, on one hand, we see a emergence of the feminine, but at the same time, it's being portrayed as nothing of importance. Like words like mother and woman are being replaced and they are diminished. There are women who don't want to define what a woman is, and that's outrageous to me as a man.
Yeah, I think that I've been a product of that because I'm from a family of five, right? And my mother and father were parents of the '60s. Like I was raised in the '60s, late '50s and '60s. And I saw my mother, good housewife, right? And I didn't want to do that. I was never going to be a housewife. I thought that was a diminished role. And my father, when I was 16, was murdered. And that shifted everything. It shifted my mentality, how I saw the world, and it shifted my mother because she was there. You know, I didn't even realize this, but she was a product of gun violence. I mean, it was a holdup. It was a robbery. It was a very, tragic story. And she, I guess, is a very big role model because what she did, it was a very Jewish thing. Is here she was, like, she wore those house dresses and, made dinner and all that. She went back to school and she became a social worker. And she like expanded into a very different person. And she learned how to do all the things that she couldn't. I mean, up to a certain point. And she's still alive. She's 95, which is amazing. But she became a very different person because times changed. And in the 60s and 70s, that's when things started to really shift. I'm not a believer in one or the other. I think it's a combination. I mean, I'm not a feminist. I guess I am, but I'm not a feminist in that I would say women should rule. I think that there's a beautiful balance and women need men and men need women. And as much as we think, we're equals, we're still on the road to making change, right? And I think that what you're seeing is, and what you're maybe tapping into is originally women were so powerful. And, in the in the indigenous world, you're saying, but also way back in Samaria, in these ancient cultures, Sarah, and with Abraham and Sarah, most people don't know, was a healer. She was a healer. She was a birth mother. She was powerful. And the only reason she went off with Abraham and covered herself and like was very modest and all of that was because she was one of those temple, I don't mean to, like in the temples, the women were idolized.
I mean, the priestesses.
They were priestesses because they could give birth. And one of the things, and I don't know if this is apologetics or not, and you would hear this from the Orthodox community, but one of the reasons that there is what they call a mechitza, division when you're praying, or that the woman's work is to be at home because she's the home, she's the mother, she carries a child, and the home is her temple, so to speak. I think one of the reasons that I was taught is a fear that men have of the power of women. And we didn't know, like we bought the package of we can only be here and, and not out in the world, because it actually goes back to really basic hunter-gatherer days. Like the women did keep the home and the men were set up to go out there and be hunter-gatherers. So, I mean, I think if we go all the way back, I think that is part of it. And we're actually countercultural, you know, we changed it. Now, with that mentality, I believe women my age made it harder for themselves because I was one of those women that wanted it all. I wanted to be a businesswoman and a mother, you know, and that was really hard. And I see women today, young women who feel the same way. It was not enough to be a housewife. That was like a bad thing, you know. And I remember going to, my ex-husband was in the entertainment business, and we go to these dinners or whatever, and they would say, so what do you do? And just for a joke, I would say, oh, I'm a mother. And they left. They wouldn't even talk to me, you know, because I couldn't get them anywhere. So, yeah, I mean, it's very complex.
Yes. And going back to the example you gave of Sarah, I think maybe you also referred to the Vestal virgins, which were preparing the temple for specific birth with men, which are also brought up at the same level of spirituality. So they will have, let's say, intercourse, but at the spiritual level, at a different understanding. So it wasn't just a carnal thing with the regular, how do you call it, result of giving birth to a baby. It was something they were nurturing. The whole activity, the whole process to up to that point, it was something they're very aware of, and they're preparing mentally, physically, psychologically for.
Yeah, I think I really love that you brought this up because there has been a whole discussion of of that femininity, the spirituality and the ecstasy. I think that not many people are aware of what those temples served. It was a place of the ecstatic, and it wasn't sexual the way we know it today. And it really became concrete to me when I went to Egypt last year. I went with a group of other healers, and it was fascinating. And in all of these temples that I went to, you know, you'd see, especially in the old chambers, a lot of, you know, it could look like pornography, right? It's all sexual. But it was something much different. You know, it really wasn't, there was another level that maybe because we're not elevated enough, that the highest act that human beings can do is to create. And that the ability to do that and to be in this ecstatic state happens through, I guess, letting go and unifying with the other. And we've lost a lot of that in our religions. We don't want to talk about that so much. But the real spirituality that you see in those ruins says it all. And I think that Egypt has been misunderstood.
Yes, indeed. And I mean, this sexual energy is the one, controlled sexual energy is the one which will fire up our spine, our energy centers, and will end up in the crown. And that will be the most ecstatic moment and giving birth to everything within us. And I think this is what those in the know are fear that most of us can achieve. That means awakening, that means non-subordination, and means no more control over us.
Yeah, you're talking, you know, when you're talking, and correct me if I'm wrong, you're talking about the energetic and
Yes.
chakra system,
Yes.
or the Sefirot, which is in Kabbalah. And do you know about the Sefirot?
Yes.
The Kabbalistic tree of life?
Yes. Yeah.
And that's a high level. And I love that level because it isn't male or female. It's God. It really is. It's energy. It is the importance of balancing all of that. The reason why those Sphirot on the tree of life, that they kind of
Yes.
make triangles, are like that is because on each side are pillars that are really like this and this. And that's our lives. I mean, we really, you can never be just on that one line. We can aspire to embody every one of those energy centers, but we're always doing this. There's sometimes it's too much, sometimes it's too disciplined. I mean, that's what we're in until we can hit that middle place. I find it fascinating that, and this is just a little thing, but the scroll of a Torah, you have a belt around it and it wears a dress. And what I found out was that those were the last vestments of understanding the priestly system, like the high priest, and they have that in Catholicism, those beautiful robes, velvet robes. But the belt on the Torah, I found, well, what was that about? And there in Kabbalah, there's a whole discussion about separating your lower waters and your upper waters. That from the waist down is our animal instinct, which is good. But too much animal, if we live by the animal instinct, we stay in the ego.
Yes.
And the high priest would have to put a belt on because to remind them to keep pulling that energy upward so that it does become divine. And there you realize that you have a choice and that we are animals, but that we have a choice to elevate all the time. And that's the struggle we're in as human beings, right? There's a struggle that many of these base instincts, power, prestige, more money, more gluttony, all of those things have to have an elevated component. And you can't always be there, but that's why Kundalini, which is also, it reminded me of what you were talking about, breath work, yoga, it's much more than exercise. It's really designed to keep a human being connected to their soul.
Yes.
And that soul has to continually connect with God and with the God inside us, because it has to grow. We were put on this planet with a divine mission. And if that mission is not accomplished, we come back, right? So just the awakening to that is huge.
Yes, and you just mentioned two concepts: the symbolic concept of uh, separating the middle from the upper. This is a symbol which is not recognized in Christianity. They don't recognize as far as I know, the chakra system. They don't recognize that. And the second part you just mentioned, that if we don't deliver and we don't achieve our goals in this lifetime, we come back. Also, Christianity doesn't believe in reincarnation. I mean, they used to until I think 325 or something like that. And then that concept was removed. So at least it's a positive move forward about this, about our goal and what we are able to achieve. But I want to go back to Egypt because this year I missed this type of trip in March. To go with a wonderful group, and they went through all the chakra places in Egypt. So I'd like to ask you, how was your overall feeling, and if you really had some major spiritual experiences?
Absolutely. I felt transformed in just taking in the size of the structures and the brilliance of how things were set up. So light and the stars and the moon, like it was very cosmic. And I loved that because to me, that cosmic understanding can help people who want something tangible when we talk about God. I think that you know, you can use that as the metaphor to help understand. But in Egypt, they were so keyed into all of that. And that was the spiritual experience, was just my mind opening. It's interesting. Before I went there, I actually was a little nervous because I thought, do I tell people I'm a rabbi? Do, you know, is I'm gonna, you know, like, should I be scared? All of those things. And I found such a beautiful people, gentle people, that were very poor.
Yes.
Here are these pyramids and these structures that are cut in a certain way. There's no human way that could have happened. You know, I'm sorry. And it expands your thinking of, well, then what was that? And how did they achieve such high levels of being able to create these things? What was that? And perspectives. And I began to understand that what they called gods and goddesses, it was not paganism. It was truly understanding something cosmic, I think.
Yes.
And I feel like that's very close to what we tune into. And I don't mean aliens. I just mean that there was a story brought down. And I don't think it's a mistake that the Jewish people, or even, you know, the story of Moses, so interesting, right? He grew up as a brother to Ramses' son, right? And you don't think that they saw that he was Jewish? I mean, come on. This little boy, you know, floats down the river right at that time, out of nowhere. And that story of that brotherliness and what Moses learned and had to have learned from the brilliance of the Egyptian culture, you know, there's something very important about that.
Yes.
It was a very symbiotic relationship. And I think that it was transcendent. And there is a lot that came into Judaism, but when it comes to anything that's magical or too esoteric that way, I think religion shied away from that.
Yes. And I think
Did
Egypt
you find
is
that too?
wonderful. Again, I didn't have the chance to go. I
Oh, you
wanted to
didn't ever
go.
go.
No, I missed the trip. Hopefully next year, because there are groups going there every year, at least 2, 3 times, with various
Yeah,
organizers and well-known figures who take groups to Egypt. And indeed, I think there's a lot more to be discovered in Egypt archaeologically. And I know I'm originally from Romania, and I've heard stories that there are huge libraries, undiscovered libraries underneath the pyramids. And there is no way at this point to get to them unless you are highly awakened, you are a high vibrational state in order to penetrate certain obstacles. And I will leave it at that.
absolutely. No, I get it. I know exactly what you're talking about. I do believe that your vibration changes when you go there. When I went down the Nile, I realized all the temples were created as a chakra system in the land. Like that was, you know, I was, yeah, each temple represented a different chakra. And so they embedded in the land, in those structures, something that I think that is still unfolding. And I
Yes.
can't wait to hear what happens when you go.
Yes, I'm sure it's going to be transformational because every location which such high energy vibration and vortexes changes people. It's impossible not to.
Well, I'm kind of en route to those places. I am going to be going to Peru in August for that reason. I'm following those vortexes because I feel that it's really important for my evolution and my ability to help others. And and yeah, to, you know, what can I do to help others in a very balanced way? And I'm curious.
Yes, because a wise man once said, the most important person on earth is you. Because if you evolve, then everyone else will be able to see the evolution, the transformation, and some of them will follow suit.
Yeah, you're like a tuning fork,
Yes.
you
Rabbi
know, and
Cantor, I would like to go to a less positive side of religion and get your point of view. So, in my opinion, religion was used a lot to divide countries, communities, and we hope that in 21st century, that perception, that attitude will change. But we still see wars which are generated by religion. And in my opinion, because I said it out every single time I had the chance, I don't care what you believe in, what your religious path is, what your spiritual path is, as long as you don't destroy, you don't hurt anyone else, you follow whatever you believe in, because in the end is the same, in my opinion, is the same one God. And if we want to ascend spiritually, we're going to get there no matter what, if we want to. So, why do you think that our perception of dividing through religion is still present nowadays?
I truly believe it's because men have been at the helm. And if you go all the way back, because this is biblical, it started out with Abraham and Abraham's two sons, right? The Arabs and the children of Israel. I mean, it's been a fight forever. And even though there's been moments of forgiveness, the land itself is a huge vortex. And it's claimed by many religions because it's anybody who has that root of we all come from the same root of monotheism. And so I believe that if you look at warriors, if you look at the Vikings, if you look, what was the way that they would expand? What did men do? They overtook other people's land. And I mean, look at the Roman Empire, all the empires that just came through Jerusalem and just took it over. It was like a big Pac-Man. And it's human nature. There's a lot of philosophies of why there's war. I think, unfortunately, I'm starting to learn that so much of it is political, and it's run by a system that's I don't even know about, that none of us know about, that's really about money. It's very disturbing to me because I believe at the core of all religions is something beautiful. It's a connection to something greater than you, and with that mentality, there is the opportunity for you to live a good life, a life with values and with actions that make the world a better place. I question, every time I see Israel getting close, and I'm not going to go into the politics of that. They were getting close with Egypt at that moment, and then something terrible happened. And, that kind of begs the question, why is there war? Why do bad things happen to good people? Why can't your light and your vibration and my vibration affect the world as strongly as the political, what's going on in politics or on the stock market? I mean, we know where real value is, and obviously you're on a high road. You're on an elevated road, and I am as well. And we agreed to come into this lifetime, and being on earth is work. I don't know what to say about the politics. I'm not supposed to talk about it from my pulpit. I don't want to talk about it truthfully. And I think that I have to accept the fact that there isn't justice in the world, there is disease, there is war, unfair things happen, accidents happen, evil is in the world. You know, we agreed to come into this lifetime where we're going to see all of it, the worst of it. And the rabbis have a lot to say about that. Each rabbi, brilliant rabbis, and I've researched it because I asked the same question too. And that would take us and spin us into, so what do we think God is? You know, and why do bad things happen to good people? Bad things happen to all people.
Yes.
And you have a choice on how you frame that.
Yes. And the sad part is that even the people in the church structure, like priests, rabbis, when they talk openly to their congregations about what God will do, what Jesus or someone else will do in that particular situation, they are ostracized. The government or other forces are coming after them because they don't stay with the script. And you saw what happened to Mar Mary Emanuel in Australia, in Sydney. He was attacked, almost died. He lost an eye because he was very outspoken. So if something like this can happen to a public figure, then someone like me, which I'm a small fish, or similar people like me who talk openly about this, we have no chance, pretty much, if someone really wants to harm us.
And you and I come from the belief that we that through our vibration on some level, we bring protection around us. You know, we do things to bring protection around us. But yes, I find that very hard to swallow. Why do the small fish have to exist when there's good small fish who could actually do a lot of good in the world? You know, maybe that's lifetimes. Maybe that's just where we are. I don't think, I hope even people who are listening to this, that I believe that it's humanity, but I'll say men who have created this separation and this either or, and Jesus, if you don't claim your life and give your life to Jesus, you're going to go to hell. Judaism doesn't have hell in that same way, but all those things were very harmful to people. Or this concept of sin, original sin, Jewish people don't believe in, you know, just what we believe, what we don't believe. And I'm very curious, and I know that at some point I'm going to go back, because Jesus was this pivotal point, and we don't learn about Jesus. The Jewish people don't learn about Jesus. It's like a raw nerve, you know? And yet, he was a Jew. And he didn't even really he didn't start the religion. That's the other piece of it. There's just so many questions. But there's a lot of respect and fear that was mustered up so that you didn't ask the questions.
And it's interesting that you mentioned that, because this is one point where we might not be in agreement with, because I just recently read a book by David Asia Israel. I will give you all the details. And he says that, in fact, Jesus and his family, Joseph and Maria, were part of the Gnostic Nazorian community, and they're not Jewish. And that was the friction between the Sadducees and the Pharisees and the Gnostic community, because the Gnostics were vegetarians. They didn't allow any sacrifices, while the Jewish community, they were sacrificing animals. They didn't have any particular diet. They were respecting a diet. So a very interesting concept, because you mentioned we don't learn enough about Jesus. And that's why I went deeper into this type of teaching. These are all scrolls which were translated directly from Aramaic. So there are no Greeks, there are no Latin, there are no distortion of words or
Talking about the Dead
synonyms.
Sea Scroll? Are you talking about the Dead Sea
Dead
Scrolls?
Sea Scrolls, Nag Hammadi, plus more, and there are all kind of references in this book. And this is just volume 1, because volume 2 is about Mary Magdalene, which also is a character which we don't know much about it. And she was, based on his research, she was Jewish, the daughter of highest priest in Israel, but she converted to the Nazarenes when she realized that they are more gentle in their lifestyle and they have a deeper understanding of the teachings. So she converted, and that's why all the say goes, the Jewish church structure went after Jesus and the Gnostics because she defected to the other side. It's an interesting, theory
No, I
which
think
has
that,
to.
no, I agree with you. And I love that you have so much knowledge about that time period, because that is something so important, because there was something huge going on at that time. And we need to know more about Gnostics versus like Sadducees, the Pharisees. I do want to clarify something. In Orthodoxy and in the temples, they may have gotten corrupt, okay, because they were charging money or something along those lines. And listen, the Orthodox community, not perfect. There's a lot of things that I could say about all communities, not following through, walking their talk. But I do want to say something about eating the food, like the sacrifices, because I spent a lot of time trying to figure out, well, what were those sacrifices about? And they're actually very powerful. There were restrictions. You are not allowed to eat the blood of an animal, meaning you cannot touch their life force. And every one of those sacrifices were different according to the thing that you did that went against the rules. So if you had a low grade experience where you, I don't know, ate from the wrong silverware, whatever that is, you only had to give a meal offering, which was probably cakes. Because remember, the high priests who lived there, they weren't allowed to own any land. They weren't allowed to do anything but they were monastic, but be in that temple and serve. And so there were a lot of restrictions. And the animal sacrifices used to disturb me, right? But what they were about was when those high priests, there's a special way that they sprinkled the blood, which you can't drink, and with certain fingers and all. I mean, there was like a real method, because it was honoring the animal. They had to say a blessing of thank you for allowing me to be nourished, and returning it to God. And the sin that they would put on that animal was burned off. The animal took it, and as it's burned off and burned off the food, then there's a restoration, because all that's left is ashes. And when we're trying to get rid of something and we burn it, the smoke goes up to God. And so it was a really interesting system that I think if we had today would probably keep people in place. But it was a way to, how do I say it? It was a way to unburden yourself, because none of us are perfect and we're all going to do things that are wrong. So if you brought a bull in, everybody would know what you did wrong, right?
Yeah.
And you gave the best of your flock to God.
Yes.
So the Gnostics, though, were really strict, right? And
Yes.
and Judaism doesn't believe in that, because we are flesh and blood, and it's just a different philosophy of how to live. And these are philosophical things that probably in this day and age would have been Reform Judaism, and they just would have been different sects. But do they say that Gnosticism was Jesus's religion?
Yes, that both Joseph and Maria were part of that
Enough.
um, subdivision, or yes, community.
And
And
how did
this
they
is,
become Christian?
they didn't mention that they become Christian. It's just they stayed with their teachings and they tried to protect the teachings. And then after Yeshua's death, again, if you want to use his real name, you had the split, between Paul and Peter and the other apostles. And, Paul was much faster on gaining favors with the Romans and, promoting the church and um, putting together a structure which he pushed forward and was accepted by Romans and then by everyone else. And that turned into Orthodoxy / Christianity.
Well, I think that the Romans, think about it, giant Roman Empire. How are you going to control people? Unless you control them with fear and forcing them to be part of a religion that scares them, like, brings fear and guilt in. I mean, it was actually brilliant.
Yeah.
But anyway, it's a fascinating time. But remember, men did that.
Yes. And you know what? I'm a proponent of truth, no matter how painful that truth is. That's why I read so much. That's why I want to understand what happened and compare to what we are using today. So I agree that every religion is not perfect, that the holy books were tainted, were distorted. There were no words in Greek and Latin at that time to translate the Aramaic. So they used whatever was convenient at that time. And we have the 1611 King James Bible, which, that was also transformed and new terms were added into that version. So that's why it's very hard to talk to someone which is very secular and someone which is very hardcore religious person, because that individual will not accept any deviation from what she learned and was brought up with.
Yeah, I think that you're also bringing up one of the things that I loved is I happen to love Hebrew. And as a rabbi, you have to be able to read that text. I have a dryness in my throat. So you see how it's interpreted and it can mean different things. One example is the word fear. In the text, it says yirah, and yirah means awe, not pachad. They use this word of yirah. So think about what awe, how the difference between fear and awe is. To fear God is one thing, but to have awe
It's the opposite.
is the complete opposite. And that's how it got translated. So it's not wrong, but it's a very different version. And that's one of the reasons I love, and I could study more, and I want to study more Hebrew. And same with Aramaic. And I don't know if you know Aramaic,
No.
and I know very little just of Rashi's script. And that has different interpretations.
Yes.
And then you get into the whole brilliance of language. Oh, and in the Dead Sea Scrolls, there were different versions of the Bible. And there were things that were left out. There's a whole apocrypha that is recognized, in Judaism. So that's fascinating to study those scrolls. And they've only come out in the last, I don't know, 10
60
years,
years.
right?
I mean, no,
60,
45,
well,
47. Yeah. I mean, I have my favorite Aramaic translators, if I can say so. And one of them is Lar Mule from Denmark. I don't know if you heard of him, but he wrote some magnificent books about Jesus and Mary Magdalene, about the Judaism, Judaic numbers and their significance. This is his latest
sure,
book.
the whole gematria.
Yes. And I trust him because he studied Aramaic for his entire life. He spent years in, he went to Israel every year for certain ceremonies in the desert. So that's why I look at people who really have the knowledge and no interest of deforming or distorting this knowledge, because they have a certain ethics and a certain vibration and connection with God that there's no point in for them doing that.
I just love that you brought that up. And do you know that some believe that the Hebrew letters are code? Just like, and I say this, I teach this even to the kids because nobody taught it to me. There's numerology in Judaism, and each one of those Hebrew letters is energy. It's a whole study, and it's fascinating. But everyone, their numerical system is the same. They use the Hebrew letters. And I think somebody wrote a book, and I think it's been updated, called the Bible Code. And just like we have
Greg Braden
what's that?
is the author. Yes.
Oh, okay. So you know about it. And just like our computers have codes, there's a way of reading the Torah that way. Tell me his name again.
Greg Braden, double G at the end.
Well, I have to, yeah, I have the first books, but I just find that fascinating, and it's magical to me, just like you're saying.
So see, this is the beauty of life. This is what we should do, not create wars, not go after, killing people and hurting them. And this is the beauty of life, enjoying, learning, being happy, in love with ourselves and with God and divinity. And we miss that sense of belonging and being. Instead, we fear death. Why? Because we don't know who we are.
And we don't understand the whole landscape of what we don't see. Think about it. God's invisible. Buckminster Fuller, there's a quote that I read, and Buckminster Fuller, I'm sure he created the geodesic, and which, by the way, there's a whole piece of Judaism too in Kabbalah, that's sacred geometry, that is just also fascinating, because those are the things that link us together. We're at a place, but let me go back to what Buckminster Fuller said. He said the greatest contribution came from Sigmund Freud to the world, not Einstein. It was Freud. And his student said, well, why? And he said, because he taught us how to see the unseen. And he taught us that the unseen is what's affecting us, which is, brilliant, which is just fascinating, obviously. And I don't know if you watched Fabulous Fungi. There was this great, did you see that? And how that whole web of interconnection, which is the world, and that mentality will bring us closer to peace. I think, just like what you're saying, we need to honor curiosity and get to know each other. It's too easy to separate and stay in your own belief system. And the reason you and I are here is because we are curious, and that we're seekers of the truth. And there's a lot of truth that lies in all religions and stories and reasons, but not to be against each other.
Yes.
Really, I find that so sad. And the stories, we all have them. We all have narratives. The Palestinians have a narrative. The Israelis have a narrative. The Ukrainians have a narrative. I don't know what the Russian narrative is completely, but there's so much hurt and pain. And like you said, we worry about death. And that unseen piece is our greatest fear, because we haven't used the brilliance of mysticism or higher realms of understanding why we're here. That's the question. That's what keeps me awake at night. I'm in search. You are too. We will be our whole lives. And we bring people with us along the way for as long as they want to look.
Yeah, and I think the instant gratification mantra is the one which invaded us in the last 20, 30 years, and it's very hard to um, take it out from the young minds, because this is what they want: instant gratification. Doesn't have to be necessarily online, but mostly online. But in real life, when they go to the mall and they meet with a friend, that quick gratification has to be there, because their attention span is not in place anymore, has been diminished, has been atrophied. I mean, to give them a 300-page book and tell them you have 2 weeks to read that book is like, oh my God, are you killing me? You hate me? Why do you need to do that? Because it's a commitment of time and focus.
Yeah, I think you bring up something like two words that you said are huge. And one is this instant gratification, because we do live in a world, there's a lot of good, but it with the scrolling and with phones, and some of it's good. I mean, you can look things up really fast, and there's good things about it. But that culture is very selfish. That level of I don't know if they're it's not millennials, it's the Gen X, or they don't know the whole story and they don't care about the whole story. And I don't know if it was because of COVID that there was this feeling of being gypped, or they didn't, now is their time, they better get it all in now. Where you and I come from is countercultural. It looks boring. It looks boring. I would say that word boring is probably another huge one. And because boring means that you have made a commitment and you slow way down and you don't skip steps. Because if you realize that if you skip the step, you're going to have to go back again. And that natural, slower, steady system, and we learn that from watching, seasons change, or we watch something grow. You don't see the growing every day, but you have faith. Like, we know because it's happened enough times, but things right now, during the seasons can look completely dead. But a lot is going on that we don't see. And it's people and teachings like that will nourish our young people who want instant gratification because they're bored. I mean, that's why they would take drugs or distort the world, like you're saying.
Yes. And because you mentioned drugs, we as a family were very fortunate that our boys growing up had a very good environment, not only at home, but at school. We are very, very lucky. And I thank God every day for this chance to stay clean. But I told my boys, if you want to experience something else, a higher level of consciousness, you come with me and we do ayahuasca together. We do psilocybin together in a controlled environment, someone who holds space for us. So you see how it is to have a different perception of reality, of yourself, connect with divinity potentially. So I was there for them to offer the other side, but the good side, not the one which can become addictive.
Well, I love that you say that. And what a beautiful thing as a parent to create space for. My kids would say, "Oh, Mom, I don't even want to hear about you wanting to try psilocybin, and I don't want you with me, if I'm going to do that stuff." But Claudiu, in my family there is addiction, and I am, I'm not knocking on wood because I don't even know what that means. Like, that's one of those Bubba mindses. Those are old wives' tales. That's superstition. However, they've come through it to the other side. And no one currently that I know of is suffering with addiction, but we all have been through it in one way or another. And that's a big spiritual experience. The only way you recover is through God. You must have a connection to something higher than you. Like, and because the ego drives you, and we all know enough about psychology today, because that took us to the next level. Spiritual seekers and science and all of that's like kind of all met now, because we, as a society, have elevated ourselves through therapy, through self-reflection, through meditation, and we can explain things through science now. So I know that I can teach different things and get people on board because I do have scientific proof, or I can show them something or give them a metaphor that is very tangible. But I have, and it was, I think for you, maybe it was luck, good parenting. It's interesting because when I was, watching my daughter go through this, and I sat in circles with other parents, I thought, if I had only done this and been there even more as a helicopter parent, maybe I should have been a helicopter parent. And the helicopter parent would say to me, well, maybe I should have not done, I was a helicopter parent, maybe I shouldn't have been a helicopter parent. And you realize it was going to happen anyway, which
Yes.
brings me to another piece, is that lack of control, impermanence. Buddhism really is wonderful with its philosophy about that, because it kind of starts there. Expect impermanence, expect things to be shifting all the time. Not Christianity and Judaism do not do that. They say it, but that should be beaten into us first. You will die. Life is gonna, you're, flesh and bones. And it's not so bad. That could be a whole new life. But I agree with you. I think that ayahuasca and psilocybin and all of that's become something very different. It's not the opioid crisis. Two different animals. The frog poison. I haven't done it myself, so I can't really speak from experience, but I have spoken to a lot of healers who I respect deeply. And it shifts the brainwaves. I mean, it's even, there's even psychologists who are having so much success with helping trauma victims. And that's exciting, but it's limited. And like you said, it's a safe environment. It's not just doing this, at a party out in the desert. So I think that you can do all the right things, Claudiu, and you can be a good person, and bad things still can happen. And this is the Jewish thinking. This doesn't come from me. However, it's something that I really love. It comes out of actually survivors from the Holocaust too. When bad things happen, God exists in what you do about it.
Yes. On the reaction. In the reaction, yes.
Your reaction and how and there's no insurance policies. Look, being a rabbi, cantor, I thought, oh, insurance policy. The worst things happened to me. I got a divorce and, just really hard things happened. And I don't buy everything happens for a reason. I don't buy, that this was God's, decree and it's going to be good for you later. I think in retrospect, maybe you can go there, but Judaism does not believe in fate. It believes in faith. And one of my very favorite rabbis, and I hope you get to hear him because you can hear him online, Rabbi Jonathan Sachs, he has this gorgeous quote that he says, because everyone has said to him, well, why do you think bad things happen? And he said, I don't know. But what I do know is we have to keep questioning, and faith is where we find God in the questions. Faith is where we find the answers in all that questioning. The real quote is, faith lies in the questions, not the answers. And I love that.
Yes. And to give you another quote from a beautiful song is, release control and surrender to the flow of love that will heal you. And it's very telling what we have to do when we are in bad spots or tight spots.
I really appreciate you talking about love, because in our society, it's a real hard thing it just sounds trite. All we need is love, right? All you need is love. And we use that word freely. But I use it as an analogy for a lot of people who don't believe in God at all. And I said, that's okay. What do you believe? And I try to bring them and help them, or just make space for them wherever they are. It's fine. You don't have to believe in any God to be a good human being. But love is very similar to the concept of God. Can we see love? No. Well, we think we have made little hearts, right? We can't see love. We can't hold on to love. It's invisible. We feel love. And that is what God is a good force that you feel. And a pathway. But it's trusting that intuitive trust and intuitive feeling. And I think as a rabbi and a cantor and a leader of a community, that's all I can hope for, is to allow people the dignity to discover, because all the answers are in us.
Yes.
They are. But most people don't know how to turn inside. And when they do, like you said, in the younger generation, their head is just can't focus on what it is to really embody yourself. And my hope too is that people can quiet down enough. And that's what I try to teach is like, let's get slower. And as you said, that's how it all started. Because who writes anymore? That's where those scripture comes from. Why the desert? Why did they travel in the desert? Because there's no distractions and it's so boring that you will listen. So
yeah, and it
yeah,
wasn't only Jesus went to the desert. There was other ascetics and sages who went there, and Mirabai Starr wrote a whole book about the saints of the desert or something like that. I don't remember the exact name of the book. But going back to the concept of love, I think it will be interesting for those watching us to try this test, because when I meditate, I observe my body reaction to certain thoughts or words. And when I when I think and feel the word love, my left side of the body, especially the hand, starts moving, shaking. And then I switch to Yeshua. It's a different type of shaking. Then I switch to gratitude. It's a very subtle one, but the word love is the most powerful one. It pretty much shakes my whole body, but starts with the left hand. And I was sitting in a guided meditation this morning, and at the end, I asked the person holding space, I asked him why this happens to me. And he said, just ask the question during the meditation and see what the answer is. But again, could be a different type of coding when we use different type of words with different meaning. But of course, they all have to be positive. I'm not thinking about anything opposite of that.
No, I think you, as you were talking, and you said the word love, I could feel my entire body light up. It's how I feel when I'm doing Reiki, or when I'm deeply in a meditation, and I could feel when you said love, the totality. My son is going through chemotherapy. He just finished, and it was just the last 3 months have been hell. And watching your child go through that is unbearable. And there were so many times that I just would go, I don't know what to do with myself. What do you, as a parent, you just want to grab them and they don't want you. He's a grown man. And it was such a turning point because I felt like I was losing my faith. I started to get depressed. I was like, I can't, this shouldn't be happening. This cannot happen to my son. And something happened for me, that stillness that you're talking about. And even in spending time with him and spending time with great teachers who reminded me of what our sages teach when these horrible things we're faced with them, when life will kick you or sideswipe you. And what do I tell him, who's in the beginning of his life? Why at 33 did he get cancer? I mean, there was no reason. And even the prayer books that I know all the prayers, it was like, none of these prayers are working. I mean, I actually started to write a song. Where is my prayer, God? Where's the prayer? Come on, we're going to talk here because I don't know who else to talk to. And that's all I could do was pray and start writing prayers for him every day. And whether, that's all I could do. And when you go through that kind of a trauma, you lose your tools. But what I said to him and what I saw around him was so much love. And it wasn't a trite word because his true love is at his side. But there was a day where he started to lose all of his hair. And so his girlfriend, shaved his head, and watching that was very hard as a mother. And then there's this picture later on that day, and 4 of his friends shaved their heads so that he didn't have to feel alone.
Wow, that's powerful.
And that's love. That was love. I said, David, I don't know anyone that would shave their head for me. My brother said, I wouldn't shave my head for anyone. It was so beautiful. I said, you're in recovery. You're going to recover because of love.
Yes.
You are so loved. And I said, this is the most horrible thing to go through, but look what we learned. It was really all that we had, love and prayer.
Yes. I know within me that everything is going to be fine and he will pull through and he will have a wonderful life. That's a given. We don't have to think of anything else but that.
I do. And I know that he will probably be on a podcast, but it'll be different. Because I know it's changed him. It's changed all of us.
Yes. Rabbi Cantor Judy.
Yes.
It's not fair to end this interview and this wonderful discussion without letting everyone know how you can help them. What are you offering? Please.
What I'm offering is, first of all, for you to watch me on social media. And that is at Rabbi Cantor Judy. I have another Instagram. If you don't get to that one, Rabbi Cantor, it's RabbiCantorJudy. And I also have one that's with Judy G. So there's 2 chances for you to find me on social. My hope is that also I have a beautiful website. I work with people one-on-one, and I offer, if any of this touched anyone or if I've helped anyone that wants to have a further discussion, I offer 15-minute consultation where if I can't help you, let's put our brains together and find out where you are headed. I feel that it's so important for anyone who thinks in the same way as Claudiu and I to not feel alone. We're so alone in this world, and conversation is what is so healing and loving. So those are 2 things. And my website is rabbicantorjudy.org. And you can find out more about me. I'm in the process of teaching monthly classes right now that are connected to the moon. And I do a sound bath, and the crystal bowls that I use are incredibly healing and vibrationally will elevate you. at the end of that class, but it's to approach every month and every new moon with an opportunity to set an intention for yourself, and to live in that way is really powerful.
So in other words, you are offering alternative way of healing as well.
Absolutely.
That's
One that's
wonderful.
more traditional, but I weave that together. And I think that curiosity in these discussions are the most important thing that we can offer, that I can offer.
Perfect. Any other final thoughts before we wrap up?
Just that I can't wait to talk to you again at some point. And yeah, and I think that to share some of the things that we've discovered, and new terrain that we're going to be finding.
Thank you very much. All the best
Yeah.
to you, your family, and with
you
everything
too.
you're gonna do this year.
Thank you so much. Thank you for being in this world. You've brought so much light.
Thank you very much. And to my viewers, thank you for watching. Share it, leave a comment, visit spiritualinspired.ca. And until next time, love and gratitude.